Welcome to the Trumpet of the last few days. I'm Stanley Farrar.
And I'm Robert Farrar.
And I am Joshua Farrar. In our typical order of introduction.
That has become routine.
It kind of has, yeah.
We need to mix things up next time. Quick, somebody hand me a blender.
Oh, no. A stand-up mixer's much better. We don't need everything pureed.
I can't help but think of that that program, more like social media, called Mixer. Whatever happened to that? I think it died.
Probably did. A lot of things died.
Yeah. It was trying to compete with YouTube back there for a while, but didn't go too well.
A lot of things have tried to compete with YouTube and failed.
Yeah. It's kind of weird how YouTube has been.
Though there still are some competitors.
It's kind of weird how YouTube's been killing itself, and nothing's risen up to replace it.
That's because the base invested cost in order to compete with it is so high. Do you know how much servers you would have to have just to hold that many videos? And how much those servers cost to maintain?
Oh, tremendous.
The reason why YouTube is ahead of the competition is because they maintain servers like that, and they agree to pay the people who post videos. The only one who really competes at an even level with YouTube are porn sites.
Okay. I believe it, but okay.
So that puts us out of luck.
Yeah. Really does.
Though our videos go up on YouTube and up on archive.org.
Which we are plugging right now, I suppose.
Come and watch us on YouTube or archive.org. We don't care which.
Either way, it'll be archived.
Yeah, either way. So, the news lately.
See.
What are we talking about again?
Which topic should we broach first? Well, we could get the shortest one out of the way. Let's start off with the fires. Yeah, that's going to be the shortest one.
Oh, the shortest one?
The shortest one will definitely be the fires, because all we can talk about is how stupid people are who started it and how it goes.
And how experts say just let it burn.
Yeah.
Well, actually, they are saying that they've already caught several arsonists. One of which was tied back to Black Lives Matter. Actually, the one that was caught in Washington State was tied to Black Lives Matter, but there's been several caught in Oregon.
Okay.
There was one
kind of like with the Australia wildfires that everyone's forgot about since it happened in January. Yeah, they were they were trying to blame everything on climate change and global warming, which, interestingly enough, Obama has also claimed these fires are the responsibility of global warming and climate change. And interestingly enough, every time they do that, they find that it's arsonists that are responsible for most of them.
Yeah, it's something else when they find a guy pouring gas out onto the shrubbery in the woods and lighting it on fire.
Yeah. Although the first one from Oregon started with, if I recall correctly, a gender reveal party.
Yep.
Yeah.
I wonder, was it a boy or a girl?
Now there's 50 of them burning. Just a hot individual. Maybe just hot-headed.
I don't know.
I don't know.
Maybe the type
They're
of girl that makes people a little hot under the collar.
You know, the environmentalists have kept them from taking and clearing out all the dead undergrowth and debris that's piled up over years. And they really shouldn't be surprised that fires get out of control.
it was
They
really.
go
I was
ahead.
taking an environmental science class this past semester, and they made us cover the Australia fire. And one thing that came out around that time was that they it was either the media or the government started promoting using an ancient Aboriginal technique of burning the underbrush, which has been used across the world for millennia to prevent wildfires.
Interestingly enough, that exact same method was banned in California back in the 1820s, I believe it was. And they have just reinstated it.
The rest of the U.S. has
Well,
been
it was
doing it
banned in
for.
California. It was banned in Oregon. It was
He froze.
fires
Oh,
burned.
there's.
Then we end up taking and affecting the spotted owl.
Spotted owl.
Well,
Most animals will
the
be
owl
fine.
can find a new spot.
and it'll help people spot it as it flies away.
Well, actually, it'll keep it having a home because a lot of those pines in that part of the country require fire. Just open up their pine cones.
Yeah. It's a quite common thing for coniferous trees. It's a biology term that a lot
But
of
right
people have
now there's
forgotten these days.
29. Right now there's 29 separate fires burning in California, 50 burning in Oregon. A commentator that I was listening to yesterday took and went through and stated, well, you got to look at the populace and there's so many more people there. So, of course, there's going to be more arsonists. Well, theoretically, he's right. But then why isn't Texas burning? Texas has the second largest population in this country, and yet it's not on fire. It's a desert state. It's
Part of it.
Huge population. Well, 75% of it. Well, not all of California is a desert state, and almost none of Oregon is, but yet they're still burning down.
Guess it's not the rainy season.
In fact, Washington is just a wet state in general.
Yeah. And the entire West Coast is burning. Isn't it interesting that the West Coast is on fire? Normally, you expect it from California. They get it every year.
Yeah.
But the entire West Coast is on fire after you have all these Antifa and Black Lives Matter people going around setting their towns on fire. When
Maybe
you get
they
that many
decided they missed a
arsonists
few.
together in one group, they may have, because there's been some towns that have been totally obliterated because of these.
I know a guy. There's a guy that I worked with not long ago that his hometown in Northern California completely burned to the ground about a year or so back.
Well, California has struggled with fires on the regular.
Yeah. But wildfires just obliterating small towns is not uncommon.
No, but they've just one right after another this year. And some of them, they know are arson set.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, did the arson set it to burn the forest, or did they set it to burn the town?
Or both.
Maybe they can't see the forest for the trees.
And the mismanagement of the forests have just contributed to it.
Yeah.
That and they.
But it's not uncommon for environmental issues, or more specifically, environmentalist solutions to backfire. For a quick recap for those of people who've forgotten, we stopped using paper grocery bags years back because the environmentalists said it was environmentally unsafe. So we switched to plastic, which ironically didn't change much. Then they started saying that that plastic was unsafe. So some places switched back to paper. Ironic how that worked, isn't it?
Well,
they decided that
I was working.
that gas power, well, the gas and coal was too unsafe. So let's switch to solar and wind. Well, what did wind do? Wind killed off entire populations of native birds, devastated the local climate and the local ecology. What did solar do? Well, solar did the same thing, but it also displaced thousands of animals that lived in the region and killed off thousands more, additionally making entire airspaces above them completely impossible for flyover for animals, which killed off migratory birds, which destroyed the ecology of other zones. On top of that, in order to receive batteries, in order to make any of these things work, they had to mine zinc. And do you know how zinc is mined? Strip mining, which completely destroys huge areas of land. They were better off just keeping their nose out of it.
Which, by the way, another thing about wind is that they have nothing to do with the blades after they're used. So all they can do is send them to a landfill, and they're filling up the landfills.
Well, that's the same thing with electric cars. Electric car parts.
When I was y'all's.
Go ahead.
Actually, I was younger than y'all. I worked for a grocery store when they took and made that initial conversion from paper to plastic. And you're right, they were touting, oh, it's so much better for the environment because you're not killing all the trees to make paper. They didn't take into consideration that trees are a renewable resource. Plastic is made from oil.
And oil is not a not
well,
easily.
Oil is a renewable resource, but it just takes so long that it's not efficiently a renewable resource.
It takes more energy to make it than what it costs just to drill and pump it out of the ground.
Unless this growing it with algae plant works.
Yeah, if that works, that would change things. But as things are currently, you can get oil from plants, and animals, but that doesn't mean that there's not a lot of process involved.
It's not efficient, is the point.
So it's not efficient. Getting it out of the ground is, but not making it. But trees, you just plant the seed and take care of it, and it grows up like any other plant. And you can make paper out of corn stalks. You can make paper out of hay stubble. You can make paper out of trees. You can make paper out of just about any plant life. And we cut our lawns on a regular basis. You could take and use that for making paper. So they just totally discount the fact that it grows. I'm right now surrounded by a renewable resource that they use for making paper.
Some of those trees...
The leaves that fall in the fall.
Most of those trees around you are probably older than most of these environmentalists saying that we've got to save them.
But I was told,
yeah, definitely.
as I was told by a teacher from a town that manufactured paper, this whole save paper, save the trees thing is nonsense. We have plenty of trees, and we're just gonna keep getting more.
We actually have more trees in the United States currently than they did when the country was initially settled.
Thanks to legislation.
Well, partially. But you have to figure we had entire states that didn't have a tree and one on them.
Oklahoma, for example.
Did you ever hear about the time Kansas tried to make an arboretum?
No, I didn't.
It died.
It's not surprising. Have you ever been to Kansas?
Very briefly.
The only trees that get enough water to survive in Kansas are those that are those that are planted along creek and riverbeds. Everything else just dies out because there's just no groundwater.
That's the way it is in the state of your birth.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And that's the home of the Arbor Day Society that pushes the planting trees every year.
They should just stick to what they're good at, corn.
Oh. Now
that we've completely given away the state of our birth.
No, you just limited it down to like 3 states.
One of which we already eliminated by actually stating its name.
Yes. But the fact is that as you look at how the environmentalists are limiting things, it's hard to fight a wildfire if you can't use the water.
Well, depends on how you're fighting the wildfire.
If you just let it burn, then...
Sand is pretty effective.
Sand is extremely effective. But
halon is also extremely effective.
I'm not in a confined space, yes.
Yeah, granted, in a confined space. But considering it's the chemical reaction of halon with the fire itself that causes it to kill itself.
Yeah.
And it's extremely toxic and will possibly kill you.
That's right. In a forest, they prefer to take and use where they fly over and drop chemically treated water on the forest fires.
Do they go with AFFF?
You have all this red. I'm not sure really what they use. I know it's a. It turns the water dark red, so it looks like they're pouring blood on it.
Then it's not AFFF. AFFF, for the audience, by the way, is a chemical that is common in. It's not really a chemical. It's more like a soap, like a really, really dense soap that is used by certain firefighting groups and industrial places to fight fires. That creates. It literally stands for aqueous film forming foam, where they mix it with water and it creates a highly dense foam over the surface of water that just smothers out any fire.
And they use that on any type of fire that you couldn't put out with water.
Well, it uses water.
And that you can use
there's a ratio of it.
Yeah, but if you were to use regular water, though, without something in it, it wouldn't put the fire out because the fire's too hot.
Yeah.
But if you've got a fire it's not like a campfire you can just dump a bucket of water on. you need it, it'll actually fires can get hot enough with enough fuel that it'll separate the hydrogen and oxygen and make the fire worse.
Yeah. Little science lesson for the audience, by the way, is there are typically there are two major different ways of fighting fires, generally speaking. The first one is the most common one, and that is to cool down the fire enough that you have broken the chemical reaction to where it is no longer generating its own fuel. This is it's basically taking an endothermic reaction and decreasing the energy level of it enough that it no longer continues the reaction.
What it is it's an exothermic reaction, but it requires a certain activation.
That is what endothermic reactions are, Robert.
Endothermic reactions draw in the heat. They
draw in the heat in order to create the reaction and then expel a greater amount of energy than they absorbed. It's the way they do it. Just the barrier is really high. An exothermic reaction has a very, very low reaction point, like, say, putting water on magnesium, for example, where it has very, very little energy needed to create the reaction, but gives off a reaction almost immediately. Say, vinegar and baking soda is a good example. Endothermic is far more like a campfire. You have to put in energy to get anything out.
With a
fire, you've got...
That is how that works.
No, an endothermic reaction.
With a fire, you've got...
end result is it's colder than when it started out.
No, that's not how that works.
That's the point of an endothermic reaction.
No, that's not how that works.
Trust me.
For a fire to operate, you have to have fuel, air, and heat.
Yeah.
Take away any one of the three and you'll kill the fire.
And putting water on a fire gets rid of the heat. So it prevents the continuation of the reaction. Putting your secondary option is trying to smother it. Like, say, your typical fire extinguisher bottles are CO2 bottles, and they blast away the oxygen in the area and smother the fire. That's how they work.
That's also how halon works.
Yes, that is also how halon works. Your third option is to remove the fuel from the fire. And this is where the fighting fire with fire thing comes from, where you would create a zone in front of the wildfire where you would burn out everything in front of it so that it would have no fuel to go to and continue burning. This option is also
fire
used...
breaks.
Yes, fire breaks use this method. And every single method of fighting a fire uses one of those three methods. Although the third one, removing the fuel, is the least common because it's the least feasible most of the time.
Yeah, but they use it a lot in brush fires and forest fires and prairie fires.
Well, the less feasible the other options get, the more feasible removing the fuel becomes in correlation.
Yeah, because you're dealing with a massive area to cover. When you figure that how long the state of California is,
yeah,
how big Oregon is,
and
Washington is,
and considering the government hasn't created satellites that can control the weather and drop hailstorms on them in order to remove the fire yet.
Well, that's technically what something similar is what happened to the forest fires in Colorado. They had a snowstorm.
Yeah, but it wasn't created by the government satellites, weather satellites.
No, but it's amazing how many people believe that the government is out there with satellites controlling the weather and steering hurricanes into the coast.
Oh, trust me, if the government could control weather, they'd be using it to extort money out of the insurance companies. More specifically, they would buy the
Yeah.
insurance companies, mandate everyone has insurance, which they do already, and then make it to where the weather is no longer ever an option for getting insurance payouts.
Well, even so, insurance companies a lot of times won't take and pay off for an act of God.
Well, I don't blame them.
But how do you determine
All
what's an act of
weather is
God?
an act of God.
They still will pay out for
Well,
weather, though.
Yeah, but when they say an act of God, they mean
If
divine
you're-
punishment.
Yeah, they usually do.
Earthquakes, hurricanes, tornadoes, some lightning strikes even have been dubbed acts of God, and insurance companies have refused to pay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but don't they notice they only ever pick the negative ones to call acts of God?
I mean, define negative.
That's true.
I don't see a bar
Oh.
burning down as being negative in any connotation.
Well,
Unless something else burned down around it.
Curb your
we know
pyromaniac tendencies.
we know that God has used fire as a means to punish people in the past.
Yeah,
but
he's also used
I think man is
crevices in
too
the earth,
heavily
too.
involved with this.
Well, I also think that they are intentionally just looking for an excuse not to pay out.
Oh, they are. They definitely are. But still, though, when you look at the areas that are burning, yes, they've done tons of stuff to deserve for God to take and rain fire down upon them and destroy them. There's no doubt about that. It could easily take and fall into the category of Sodom and Gomorrah all over again. But
I think
even if
it would fall into the. I think it does fall in the category of Sodom and Gomorrah all over again. But remember, there was a caveat for that. Just had to find one saved person in the area.
10.
10. Sorry, just
people.
10.
Yeah,
just 10 righteous people. And I'm pretty sure there are about 10 righteous people in California. Total.
I'm sure there are more than 10 righteous people in California.
You have more faith in California than I do.
The most people in the state with the most people in the country, there's bound to be more than 10.
Oh, my money's still on 10.
But I figure it probably isn't more than 10.
Just like
I
there's
still don't figure it's probably more than 10%.
It's probably just about 10 total in New York as well.
Now the odds lower as you get toward the coast. The odds get lower as you get toward the coast of California, but the state of California is a big state.
I'm aware. I've been there before.
Now they may not be able to find any righteous people in government in California.
I'd be surprised if they could find any righteous people in government in general.
I'm sure they exist somewhere.
There's bound to exist someplace. But as you look at how every perversion and distortion does seem to start in California. But we know that a large portion of these fires are started by man. They're not being started by God. They're not caused by. They're not, for the most part, being caused by lightning strikes. They're not being caused from volcanic eruptions or fire raining down from heaven,
or even the ever so convenient spontaneous combustion.
But here's the assumption though that you're making. You're assuming that God doesn't act through, because God has used people to bring judgment on them.
He has used people, but he also doesn't infringe on free will.
So he has to find somebody who's willing to carry out that that judgment.
Yeah.
I tend to think that California's bringing, and Oregon, and even Washington State are bringing it upon themselves more so than an outside force.
Yeah,
just the wickedness of man destroying itself.
I tend to agree, most specifically because although the Sodom and Gomorrah references are amusing, that was Old Testament. That was before the sacrifice. That was before redemption. And I do not believe that everyone in California is beyond redemption.
Well, I also don't believe that everyone in California is going to die to these wildfires.
So I don't believe that God would destroy California altogether. What was that?
I said I also don't believe that everyone in California is going to die to these wildfires. And no, that is not assuming that those who do die from the wildfires are. I'm not saying that it's an act of judgment
wicked,
on
evil
them.
people.
I don't know them. I don't know what they've done or haven't done.
But just taking it by the math, statistically, at least one of them is a wicked person.
Very likely.
At least one, yeah.
Statistically, I would say. Go ahead.
I think you're underestimating if you think only just one is.
Oh, yeah. But I would also say that statistically speaking, most of the people who've died to COVID are probably bad people. Just statistically speaking. Did they deserve to die of COVID? Probably not. But...
Well, deserving death, I mean, without sacrifice. Everyone deserves death. Without...
Did they deserve to die that way? Probably not. Did...
I'm going to disagree with you there. If we're not saved and walking with God, the Bible's very clear. We're deserving of hell. Can you get a worse end than hell?
You can't get a worse end than hell, no. But...
So...
I would prefer to give the ones that are wicked as much time as possible to repent. I don't want them just dying
and
off
I believe
of
God
plagues.
does.
But eventually their time runs out. And...
Yeah, eventually their time runs out.
Well, when you look at the plagues that have swept through this world, this current one is a pretty wimpy plague.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if you take the WHO stats, it's a while ago they estimated it to be 2.5%, but that was a while ago for the mortality rate. And the CDC rates it at under 1%.
I mean,
which kind of
the CDC
where's the
states
fun
you have a
plague?
99.96% chance of.
These days, all the plagues everyone ever talks about is sickness. Where's the fun plagues? Where's the water to blood? Where's the locust swarms? Where's the days of darkness?
Actually,
China
got the locust swarm.
China has the locust swarms.
They also got the river to blood too.
Did they get the frogs yet?
No, they haven't got
the frogs. Can't have a good series of plagues without the frogs.
But
or the lice.
Or the lice.
They're throwing a fit about the president in those interviews, having said, "Of course I downplayed it. I didn't want to cause a panic," which admittedly, he should have been honest and straightforward, not arguing with that. But at the same time, he was wrong when he said that it was no worse than a bad flu. Because if you take the CDC statistics, It's actually a lot better than a bad. It's just a lot less. Oh, it's just a lot more effective.
Well, there is that. It definitely. They're saying, oh, it's just horrible that he would compare it to the flu, but it is comparable to the flu.
Well, yeah, it's a cold virus. That's what the coronavirus is. The standard coronavirus is a cold virus.
Now, if you take and look at it and say, okay, yeah, SARS was a lot worse.
And it fizzled out.
MERS was horrible, but it fizzled out as well.
Well, MERS
Swine
is still
flu
around,
also
actually.
fizzled
This
out
particular
pretty quickly.
one. What was that?
Swine flu also fizzled out pretty quickly.
Swine flu, it depends on which version of it came through. But even it was not as bad as they were predicting it was going to be.
I was talking about the one that happened while I was in junior high.
Yeah, but how many people still didn't get that one because the fact that they already had an immunity because it went through when I was a kid?
Most of them. But it wasn't really a bad thing. No one panicked over it. Remember, there was a lot of hoopla in the news,
they were trying to whip up a panic, but it never worked.
And how many of the elderly survived that? Because they happened to be around when the Spanish flu went through. It wasn't a swine flu, but it was still an H1N1 virus. It was an avian flu.
Interestingly enough, the smallpox vaccine was created not by using the smallpox virus. What they did was they found a comparable virus, one specifically called cowpox, that was very common among milking maids at the time. So they took that virus and turned that into the vaccine because they're related to each other. So developing antibodies for one makes you immune to the other.
And it made it to where you get cowpox, it wouldn't kill you. Get smallpox, it would.
Yeah.
Though they both scar you up pretty good.
So does the chickenpox if you get it later in life.
So does the chickenpox if you get it early in life.
It gives you scars. It doesn't scar you up pretty good. There's a difference there. Granted, part of that difference is how much accent you put on it. Because if it scars you up pretty good, it's a lot better than if it scars you up a lot. It emphasizes it more, you know.
Yeah, what's wrong? You scared? Fear is really the biggest threat to this whole pandemic. People are terrified of it.
That's why there are states that are still locked down. Fear in politics.
Yeah, but according to the scientists, we've already hit herd immunity.
I never
if
heard
we've hit
no
herd
immunity,
there's no reason.
They're still denying that herd immunity is even possible with this virus.
Well, with as quickly as it mutates, it may not be. Look at the flu.
Yeah, but
every time you catch the flu, it's something different.
Yeah, every time. But eventually, it can only mutate so many times before it just starts repeating the cycle.
Yeah, but you can only have you can only live so long and see so many cycles.
True.
But we know that this COVID or coronavirus has taken and mutated 4 times already.
Now, speaking of the novel coronavirus, does anyone know if the movie's better, or is it just the novel we have to deal with?
I don't think they made a movie about it yet.
They're still working on the contract, right?
Yeah.
Gotta get those royalties.
They're still arguing over the name.
Yeah, you're right. They got to make sure that they've got just enough representation in the cast, too. Can't have just white people dying of it, after all.
And after all, the beer companies are throwing a fit over it. And,
not all that surprising
naming
either.
It Corona.
Corona's stock plummeted after the virus started, more so than any other alcohol brand, which is hilarious.
I like how some of the news goes through and calls it the CCP virus.
The CCP virus?
Chinese Communist Party.
Yeah.
That must be Fox.
Being they made it. No, actually, it was.
NTD News
it's
and the Epic Times.
Yeah. Both call it the CCP virus.
Both are very anti-communist party.
As anyone with a brain should be.
But and then it goes through, and some groups call it COVID-19, which I guess is the scientific name for it.
That's actually the name for the condition and not for the virus itself. The official name for the virus is SARS-CoV-2.
Okay. And the
is that kind of like Pirates?
The president likes to call it the China bug. No, the China flu.
Or the Wuhan coronavirus, or the Kung flu.
Kung flu is one of my favorites.
Kung flu is one of my favorites.
Of course, there's a lot of people who just call it the Rona. That one's amusing.
The Rona. Yeah.
The beverage bug.
Has he cut the Rona?
Or as one person called it, my Sharona bug.
My Sharona Cyrus, I believe he liked to call it.
Yep.
I think he just listens to too much Billy Ray Cyrus, but
oh. But when you take and you look at one of the jobs of the president is to not cause a panic. And this plague has not been something to cause a panic over, that much to the chagrin of the news media and the Democrats, who really wanted it to be one of, like, the Black Death. Yeah, they still got their way, but they still wanted death tolls like the Black Death.
To the point where they were even artificially inflating the death tolls. Still are.
Yeah. When you figure that in Florida, one of the medical examiners was confronted over a guy who died in a motorcycle accident that they listed that he died of COVID. And they said, well, are you going to correct this? Because after all, you said he died of COVID. We all know he died in a motorcycle accident. And he said, we don't know that COVID didn't contribute to cause the accident.
Well, they've already admitted there's a monetary incentive for every coronavirus death they have.
Oh, we lost Dad. Let's wait for him to come back on.
Down I went.
Yeah. Ooh, that felt good.
A paranoid person would think that the government pulled the plug because I took and dare spread doubt about their veracity.
No, if the government did that, you would have a harder time coming back up.
Oh. The Democrats have been lying about a lot of things. They lie about the severity of COVID. They lie. Recently, well, actually, just a couple of days ago, the transcripts from the impeachment were unsealed and released. And it shows that they knew all along that nothing happened. That they knew that there was no crime, that there was nothing to impeach him over. It was totally a seditious plot to overthrow the government by the Democrat Party. They purposely, Schiff and Pelosi and them committed sedition. One commentator thinks they ought to be tried for sedition because they fit in every step of the classification of what it means to have committed sedition. I, on the other hand, don't think you can, because they have immunity through being in Congress. I think they'd have to be kicked out of Congress before you could
I think giving anybody immunity to the law defeats the purpose of having the law.
Yes, but isn't it funny that Congress gave themselves immunity from the law?
Of course they did.
And then the courts upheld it.
In fact, personally,
then the courts upheld it.
I think they should have a clause, a sort of. I know they didn't do this, but I think they should have, where they created a written and sealed clause in the Constitution that whenever someone was to try to grant anyone immunity, diplomatic or congressional or otherwise, immunity of the law, they were to open that and just execute the person who proposed the idea.
Capital punishment for it, huh?
Yeah.
Well, sedition is a form of treason, so the punishment would be capital punishment. Do you honestly believe that our linguini-spine society could handle the majority of Congress being executed for treason?
I think it would need to. Might be what they need to grow a spine.
I think we'd have a civil war if they did it.
Quite possibly.
Of course, we might end up with a civil war anyway.
I personally don't think we'd have a civil war over it, because I don't think the common man cares enough about Congress to care if they all got executed for treason. I don't care which side of the aisle they're on. I don't think a majority of people care enough about their politicians to care if they got executed for treason.
Probably a lot of that, actually.
The media would make a lot of noise, but the average person wouldn't care.
But even their attempts to investigate it have been blocked by the fact that people are destroying the evidence just as fast as they can destroy it. Just that they couldn't destroy the congressional records.
Yeah. Because a bunch of the people they were probing, they wiped their phones. Accidentally, of course.
They Clintoned them.
Well, no, that was her computer. I mean, this is just recently.
That was her emails and her computer.
But just recently...
you forget that her assistants took a hammer to their phones.
Yeah.
But just recently, something like 15 officials wiped their phones before giving them over.
Which could
your mother
potentially have them
proved
tried
that the memory
for,
of a phone can be destroyed.
Yeah. But they could... Theoretically, they could be tried for obstruction of justice just for trying to wipe their phones.
But there's no way that 15 people would just wipe their phone by accident. Or put it on airplane mode, lock it, and forget the password.
Yeah, it could be hacked.
It's not that easy, especially if they're iPhone. iPhones are notorious for being hard to crack.
Hard does not mean impossible.
Well,
Also, just the statement of notorious for hard to crack means someone's done it.
Well, I was allowing for the possibility that someone's done it, and it doesn't mean someone from the government has done it.
I don't think that people from the government have tried that much, but I can guarantee you they've got some pretty good hackers in the government.
They got Apple to open some.
Apple usually says no.
Yeah, but in those particular cases, is the federal courts ordered Apple to.
A subpoena, if I recall correctly.
But we're talking a major criminal investigation on a federal level.
Yeah.
This is a federal investigation.
This is a major. This falls in the same category, but Apple's not as likely to cooperate with this as what they would if you or I were being suspected of something major.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a little bit different when it's their friends that are being investigated.
Yeah. So yeah, we've covered 3 topics today, so we've reached the end of our time.
If you liked what you heard or saw, then feel free to hit the like button. If you disliked it, feel free to hit the dislike button.
Also, if you disliked it, feel free to send it to someone who you want to torture. So that way you don't have to watch what you didn't like alone.
Share with your friends. Share with your enemies. Share.
Feel free to hit the subscribe button as well and ring the bell. That way you get notified when something you don't like comes up, so you know whether or not to face it.
And whoever spots mistakes in the editing can mention it in the comments and may or may not win an undisclosed prize that may or may not exist.
By the way, I need to remember to send you our new Diaspera address for the Trumpet of the last few days.
Diaspera address? Is that on the archive.org thing, or?
No. Diaspera is kind of like Facebook for those who don't trust Facebook.
Ah, a social media site I've never heard of.
It's a social media site, yes. And we have an address for the Trumpet of the last few days.
Okay. I'll leave it to you to
I'm thinking about starting a Gab address.
I'll leave it to you to put that in the comments of the episodes.
Oh, I can put it in the comments. I just can't post a deal on the side of the screen saying where it is.
I was thinking that you could put it in like the description or the comments or something like that.
Well, I can do that.
The description probably works best, though.
But feel free to tune in next time, and until then, see you next time.